Hello, my name is Harry Burke. I am the Fellows Manager here at the USC Dornsife Center for the Political Future, and I'm here to kick off our last installment of our Fellows Roundtable series, an opportunity for USC students to come and to meet and engage with our great fellows this semester. And our last one will be a conversation with Deven Patel from Unruh Associates and former United States Senator and Congresswoman Barbara Boxer. So with that, one thing I will add is there are a couple of people on this call. If you would be willing and able, we would love to see your wonderful faces so that we can all engage in a really fun conversation. Obviously, we know that certain circumstances make that difficult for people, but just throwing that out there. And this is also being live streamed on Facebook Live. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Deven, who's going to get going with this conversation. You want to take it away, Deven?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. And hi, Barbara. It's good to see you. I am super excited. So pretty much we have a set of questions to ask, but also if anyone on this call wants to ask anything, feel free to. We're here to just have a conversation and listen to the senator's experiences and everything politics. And so I guess my first question to kind of kick this off is what has been the most rewarding experience in your career so far, Senator Boxer?
The most rewarding thing in my career, oh my goodness. Well, I think if you're talking about just the moment when I became a United States Senator after 10 years in the House and 6 years in local government, and we had this Anita Hill situation where she was really demanding to be heard about what had happened to her. And this was at the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearing. And this whole incident propelled us into the Year of the Woman. There were hardly any women in the Senate. When I got there, there were 2. And there were so few in history. And we went from 2 to 6 women in the Senate. So in terms of making history, and then Senator Feinstein and I became the first 2 women ever elected to one state. In terms of feeling like I was part of something bigger than myself, that was a moment. And I think the other part has to do with what I was able to accomplish, of course. And I really went into politics to do something, not to be something. I often tell my students that. And, you know, I authored, always with a colleague from the other side of the aisle, because you had to do it in the Senate, the very first funding for after-school care. And it's still operational and it's functional. And it's taking care of 1 million kids after school every day. Now with all this coronavirus, Lord knows, but that is an ongoing achievement. Things that I did for our veterans. We had no place for wounded veterans to really get the care they needed, severely wounded veterans. And we set up a comprehensive veteran center in San Diego. That was another. We got 1 million acres in wilderness. We set up the first really important standards for clean drinking water to protect kids and people with compromised immune systems, because before my legislation, they just tested these pesticides and all the things that were in the water against a 150-pound man. They did not, you know, include in it the more vulnerable people. So I think it's a combination of making history for women and also what I was able to accomplish.
Awesome, cool. So on that note, what was it like being one of the only women in the Senate at the time, and kind of watching it transform? As I mean, obviously dynamics have changed a lot. So anything, I mean, it's amazing how much it's changed in such a short time, right? And so what was it like witnessing all that and being a part of it?
Well, it's a great point. I wrote a memoir where I talk a lot about what it was like. When I got into the House, it was 1983. And there were 435 members of the House of Representatives. And there were only 23 women. It was incredible. And most of the women there had gotten there because their husbands died. So there was sympathy vote. But there were a handful of us, just a handful. And what we began to realize is the burden we really had, not a heavy burden, but an important burden, to really be the women's voice there. Because women are not better than men. Women are not worse than men. Women are equal to men. And you cannot have a representative democracy unless you really have a wider range of people sitting around the table, the color of their skin, their religion, their sexual orientation, male, female, different ages. If you're stuck with a government that everyone looks like everyone else, it's not a government of by and for the people. So it really was hardly a place to be if you were a woman. For example, when I got to the Senate 10 years later in 92, I got elected. The guards who always guarded the Capitol always said, they looked at us, why are you going into the Senate? You know, they didn't think of us as senators. We had to wear our pin. And it happens to Black Americans too. You know, they go, where are you going? So there was so much prejudice, and there's a little bit less now. We have a long way to go, but women make a huge difference. It was, you know, the men didn't know quite how to treat us. We said, how about equally? That would be a start. And, you know, we did get a lot of prejudice thrown our way. But I'll close with this. The one good thing I say to the women and the caring men who are on this call, when you get into the Senate or the House or state representative or boards of supervisors, you really are automatically equal. No one should tread on you. You have as much power as the person next to you. So you have to stand up and you have to learn to use that power. And the one thing some of my colleagues who didn't particularly like the fact that I was against the war, and I made some statements against it, and they said, that's it, you should resign. Really? Because I was against the war? No, I don't think so. So you have to feel, you know, that you are as legitimate as anyone else. And if we don't have this diversity, we're just not going to be successful as a country.
Yeah, okay, definitely agree with all that. So on that note, Alexis has a question. Feel free to ask away. And
yes, Alexis, go.
Hi, Senator Boxer. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Sure, of course.
So I wanted to ask you a question regarding the bipartisan broadband access bill that you worked on during your time in the Senate. And I know that this is kind of a hot topic right now, given everything in the Zoom era. And I wanted to know your thoughts about why you think this could be different this time around, especially just given the amount of debt that our country finds itself with. And yeah, so if you could touch a little bit on that, I would really appreciate it.
Well, let me just say, we don't know who's going to win the presidency, but I'll go out on a limb and say, I think it will be Joe Biden. We don't know who's going to take the United States Senate, but I'll go out on a limb and say it's going to be the Democrats. And we don't know who's going to keep the House, but I'll go out on a limb and say it's the Democrats. If I'm right, and there are some changes in how we do business in the Senate, because right now the filibuster is killing everything, I would predict that a Joe Biden, Kamala Harris presidency will be one where we do what we have to do to get this country back on track. That means beating this virus. It means making sure that people have economic security. And one of the ways that's going to happen is there's going to be big infrastructure programs. And Trump's been promising it forever, and it's never happened. But what does infrastructure mean? In addition to highways and bridges and sewer systems and water systems, it means broadband. It means making sure that whatever your zip code, you can get access to speedy. Otherwise, you're going to fall back. This pandemic has ripped a real big Band-Aid off our country. And we knew always that we've had, you know, problem areas where people just can't make ends meet. And now we know it. So I would predict we'll raise the minimum wage. We'll make broadband accessible to all. We'll have a big infrastructure program. We're going to focus also that infrastructure on clean energy, solar, wind, geothermal. And we're going to put a lot of people to work, and it's all going to turn around. And I think finally we'll get this broadband access. We must have. Yeah, we must have.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And once again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just ask away. We're all here to discuss. So I want to touch on something a little bit different now. So in 2015, when you announced you were not running for re-election, you said that there is a time when you want the next generation to step in and step up. And so how did you know that you wanted to step down, or that it was time for the next generation to kind of rise and run?
What a good question that is. Well, you know, it's really, I've been very fortunate in my life. I've never had to struggle about when it was time to hold them and when it was time to fold them, as they say in gambling parlors with cards. I just knew what my time was. When I was in local government, I knew it was time to leave. When I was in the House after 10 years, they said, why are you leaving the House of Representatives to run for Senate? You'll never get elected. I knew it was time to leave. It wasn't a good reason. Newt Gingrich was coming. It was getting very nasty in the House. I didn't want to be part of it. And I knew it in my gut. I discussed it with my family and I moved on. And when I ran for Senate, my husband one day looked at me and said, what's the worst thing that can happen? You could lose. And we started to laugh. We thought that wasn't half bad because, you know, we'd been separated. I was going back and forth for so many years from the House. So it really, I knew at a certain point it was time to just hand off the baton to the next generation. So I take full credit for Kamala's being vice presidential candidate, because if I had stayed on, she wouldn't have had the chance to get, you know, national office. So chalk it up. I love it. Good things happen.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thank you. And so another thing is, one of my favorite stories that you've shared in our class, for anyone watching, I'm in Senator Boxer's class and it's one of my favorite this semester. But you shared a story about when you were running for Senate in 1992 and a donor asked you some very hard questions.
Yeah.
So do you want to share that story for everyone here to listen to? It's an amazing story.
It's an amazing story. It's hard for you to imagine how, you know, things have changed. I just want to say, this wasn't the run for the Senate. This was my run for the House.
Oh.
When I knocked on that lady's door. That's what you're talking about, right?
No,
or are you talking about what men say? Well, I'll tell two stories. How's that? Okay. I'll share two stories. The one in 1982, I ran and I lost that. It's the only time I lost. It was practically impossible to get elected. I was running for local government and I knocked on a lady's door. She opened it up. The first thing she said is, Barbara Boxer, I didn't think you'd be so short. That was her first brilliant comment. Then she says, I said, well, I hope you'll vote for me. You know, I have a good program for the environment, for kids, et cetera. So this was local government. And she said, well, I could never vote for you. And I said, well, why? She said, you're abandoning your 4 children. And I said, what? Number one, I only have 2 children. I don't have 4 children. And my opponent has 2 children and a full-time job. And I don't have another job. This is going to be a full-time job and I have 2 kids. She said, no, you have 4 kids. And she starts arguing with me at her door. And finally I gave up, of course. I knew I wouldn't get her vote. And I said, lady, I don't know if you've ever given birth, but if you have, you remember it. And I only did it twice. So that was my first very funny story about 1982. By 92, it had gotten better, but Senator Feinstein and I did face a lot of prejudice. And one of the things that they would say is, people would say, oh, I cannot, because both seats were up at once. And she was running for one seat and I was running for the other in the US Senate. And people would say, oh, I could vote for 1 woman. I could never vote for 2. To which we'd say, you never had a problem voting for 2 men. What is your issue? Yeah. And then they go, well, maybe we could vote for 2 women, but not 2 Jewish women. And we would say, well, things are really bad. We're in a recession and we need some chicken soup in the Senate. We had an answer for everything. And then they'd say, and then of course, Diane had a great line, which was, she'd say, 2% may be good for the fat content of milk, but 2% is not good enough in the Senate. That's what women were, 2 out of 100. So those are some of the stories. But if you're enticed by my stories, you should get my book because I put them all in my memoir, The Art of Tough. And I have story after story. I think things are getting better,
Definitely, yeah. Okay, so now I kind of want to talk about post office just for a little bit. So
yeah,
how has your fight continued ever since you've left the Senate? And now that I can't believe I'm saying this, but 1 week away from the election, what are you doing to really push out the vote. I know
Right.
the Senate videos you've been working on and stuff like that in the class, but for anyone here,
Right.
doing.
Right. Thank you, Deven. Well, what I decided to do when I got out is to keep my voice out there. You know, I have a lot of followers on Twitter, like not that many, but 130,000. And they wanted to hear from me and, you know, not like a rock star, but I still had some of that. I also volunteered to run my political action committee, and I've written a lot of ads that are very short ads. Some of you've seen them in the class for these very hot Senate races that we're very interested in. And we are helping 3 African-American Senate candidates who are just incredible men. And we call it the Meet the Moment Project. You know, after a Black Lives Matter, what a perfect thing then to send 3 Black great Senate candidates to the Senate. So we're working hard on that. There's some great women running. We're doing that. So I am as involved as I ever was. I'm in a way more involved because I'm not a senator now. I can really help other people. So through the PAC, through my Twitter feed, all of that, I'm really working, writing these ads. And I love having the class because the class is yet another way, Deven, for me to, you know, influence a few people who I know are influences in their own group. So it means a lot to me to have that opportunity. And I'll probably stay associated with the school because I love it. And I talked to Bob about that, and I think I will. So these are some of the things that I'm doing. I also do a lot of TV appearances on MSNBC, CNN. They call on me now and then, which is very nice. I sit here in my living room and do it. So that's about what I'm doing. But believe me, I'm thinking about it every single second. I talk to my former colleagues because this is the most important election of my lifetime. And I've had quite a few important ones.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So I guess now you talked about kind of working with your colleagues. You worked with Senator at the time, Joe Biden, for a long time while you were in the Senate. And so what was it like working with him? And to those who, a lot of, I guess, my generation, a lot of people are hesitant about, I mean, not voting for him, but his potential as a candidate. And so what is your message to them about him?
Well, that's
for so long.
That's good. And I do understand from a young person's point of view, they think that I'm ancient and he's ancient. But here's my view on discrimination against people because of their age. I think it's wrong. Some people are old at 40. I'm sure you've met them. Yeah. They don't have any zest about life. They don't have any, they'd have no interest. But some people keep their interest. And I would make this argument, as long as you have your marbles, you know, you're probably the best you can ever be the older you get, because you have had all these crazy experiences. And, you know, as you get older, you'll have more and more of these experiences. You'll meet people who'll try to shut you down and shut you up. You'll meet people who have tried to help you, assist you, work with you. And all of this, you know, shapes your view. You'll be involved in elections, I'm sure. As volunteers, you'll see who on the team is a real team player and who's in it for themselves. All these things, all the years I've been involved, I personally think, you know, I'm better now than I ever was before. Why did I leave the Senate? Not because I didn't think I could do it. I just thought it was time. I did that for so many years. So let's get to Joe. I would say this, I don't think Joe ever would have run at all if he hadn't seen Charlottesville.
Sure.
I think, and he told me this personally when I saw him on the trail. And I know him since the 1980s. And what I want you to know about Joe is a few things. Number one, he's the most compassionate and caring human being I have ever met. And I mean it. If you are a stranger and he would see you in trouble, he would run over and say, "What can I do?" He is the kindest person. I have seen him literally hold colleagues in his arms whose son had cancer, one of my friends, people who are going through just rough patches in their lives. And I've seen him lift them up spiritually, just because he has been knocked down so many times. Can you imagine if you just got elected to the United States Senate, you're 29 years old, this is what happened to Joe.
Yeah.
And he gets a call that his wife and his daughter are dead in a crash going to get the Christmas tree. And his 2 sons have been injured. And he is out of his mind with grief, almost quit, but colleagues came and said, don't do it. And he got sworn in the hospital bedside of his 2 boys. So, and then he loses one of his sons to cancer later, who I knew very well, beautiful person. Kamala knew him quite well, Bo. And then Hunter has had addiction problems. So you're talking about a human being here who has suffered mightily, who understands what people go through. The other thing though, 2 more things I want to say. Joe never forgets who he is. He never was rich, he never had money. Every single year that you had to, when you're in the Senate, you had to give your fill out your financial disclosure forms. He was the poorest one in the whole Senate, year after year. All he had before his wife started teaching was his Senate salary. You know, I had my husband as an attorney. Nancy Pelosi's husband's very successful. So Diane's, but Joe, he gave up so much, really. The only time he ever got any extra money is when he left and he wrote a book and his wife wrote a book, et cetera, et cetera. And he had a couple of clients who made speeches. So the best person, last point, this is a guy who's a prolific legislator. No one could legislate like he. The Violence Against Women Act, the Voting Rights Act, protecting our coastline from offshore oil. In all these areas, he was good. Did he ever make a mistake? Yeah, he made a mistake on the crime bill because it had to do with the punishments for cocaine versus, I forget whatever the other thing was. It hurt the African-American community. But what I want to say then is we didn't know what we were doing on that point. And everyone I knew in the Black Caucus voted for it. And Joe voted for it and I voted. So yes, it was a mistake. And Joe's copped to that it was a mistake. So he admits his mistakes. He's lived life hard. He cares deeply about the people and he's a doer. So that's what I can tell you straight from the heart. It's not political BS. It's just facts.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm 100% with you on that. I met him actually at a rally last year and it was so great to meet him. I've loved him since the first day. And so people always ask me, they're like, why? I'm like, this is exactly why. But
and you know, it's unusual for a young person because most of them are going, oh, he's so old, he's losing it. No.
Yeah, no.
We all know about his stutter, his stammer,
Exactly.
stutter. And I think it's really important. People sometimes mistake that for not having a clear mind.
Exactly.
But when you overcome a stutter, it's always there lingering.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you'll hesitate and you see it, you can still see the stutter now and then. He overcame that. That is, did you ever see him hug that child who had the stutter? Honest to God, how could you even? And the other day, there was something on my Twitter page, I don't know if you've seen it, a Down syndrome child.
I follow you. Yeah.
Oh my God, you have to look at that unbelievable video where he is walking away and this Down syndrome child says, wait. And he turns and he goes right to him and hugs him, embraces him and says, and kisses him on the forehead and says, you're going to be all right, honey. Oh God, it's just, you cannot, if anyone in your generation says, well, I don't think I'm going to vote. There's no difference between the two of them. Please tell those stories, please.
I try, trust me, I try.
Please, really, it's crazy because youth is really voting. And if you're voting for a third party, you might as well vote for, it's as good as a vote for Trump. It's no good.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so now Paula has a question if you want to go for Paula, and then we can keep going from there.
Hi, Paula.
Hi, how are you doing, Senator?
I'm good.
So the question I have is about Prop 22, and I would like to know your thoughts on it, given that you were a consultant for Lyft, and this is one of the most expensive props in this election for the California ballot. So I'm
not telling you how to vote, but what I learned when I worked for them for a reason. I felt it was important to compromise. And if people wanted to work full-time, I thought that's wonderful. But if people didn't, they should have a right to be an independent contractor. So you'd have a hybrid model. I got really hit hard by my labor friends who I love, but that's okay. I could take it. I just disagreed with them. I wanted to have a hybrid model, full-time workers getting full-time benefits, independent contractors getting some benefits, but having the ability to be flexible. I don't know what's going to happen with the thing, and I haven't taken a public position.
Definitely. Okay, cool. I know last week we talked to a strategist who had mentioned some of the work of that proposition and how we really don't know what the outcome is going to be with that one. So I'm interested to see kind of in a week where that.
Oh, they're all so interesting because there's two sides to everything, right? And, you know, if you believe in a hybrid model like mine, how do I vote? So it's very confusing in a way, but that's the thing that's interesting. Remember in the class, to those of you not in the class, we talked about what a representative democracy means.
Yeah.
A representative democracy means you vote for somebody to vote for you, right? But in California, where you have these propositions, you have a voice, boom, direct, right? So it's not that easy because there's so much money being spent on either side, you don't know which way to turn. I found myself, my husband and I, for the first time, we disagreed on a few things. We normally see things the same way. So we canceled each other out on a few things.
Yeah, I know definitely when I was going over the ballot with my parents, we were looking at the different propositions and some of us were like, I want to vote yes on this. Like, I'm going to vote no on that. I'm like, okay.
I know. It was just a very long ballot and confusing.
Oh, for sure.
And I could argue either side of every one of these things, by the by. Almost. There are a couple that were very obviously clear, but a lot of them are very dicey, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to talk about change a little bit onto the environment. Actually, I'm actually in Orange County, and there's a fire blazing about like a half mile away. But that's why Tommy, the president, was supposed to be leading this, but he actually had to evacuate. So I've been fine so far. But
are you sure?
Yeah. Oh, trust me, I've been fine. I was excited to do this.
Harry, I don't want to lose Deven. You're responsible.
I told him if he needs to run off the call to do it, and I'll take it.
Good Lord, just go. Harry will take over.
There's no one, but we haven't been evacuated yet, so don't worry. Our zone has been fine. But anyway, on the environment, I was going to say if you were senator now, still, what legislation would you be trying to push for California, given the dire need to combat climate change here?
Well, I just want to get a price on carbon.
Yeah.
If you put a price on carbon pollution, then you've done your job. Then solar, wind, geothermal will become not only competitive, but cheaper if you really put a true, what the heck is the price? Look at what the price we're paying in the fires, just fires. Yeah. And I'm in the desert. I'm looking at the winds are like ginormous. I guess it's the Santa Ana. Normally we don't even get those because we're separated by a mountain range, but it's very windy here and it's scary. So yeah, I would do, I mean, there's just many ways to put a price on it. One way is to do the cap and trade system. It's complex, but that's one way I think works very well. The other way is just to put heavy regulations on anyone that pollutes and say, you know, they have to pay into the treasury if they pollute more than a certain amount. There's various ways.
Yeah, definitely.
But that would do it. That's what we just have to move to a super 100% clean economy. If we do that, we can save the planet. If we don't do that, we're in serious trouble. And we need to work with other countries too. So I would definitely support going right back into the Paris Accord.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess on that, since we're mentioning that, what do you think of the Biden climate change plan? Do you think it addresses what we need to do, or should we go a little bit further and lead towards the Green New Deal? Or I don't know, just given that you've worked so much in the environment. So.
Well, I have to be honest, I didn't read every single word of Joe's plan. I did read the Green New Deal plan. The Green New Deal plan is terrific. It goes off into some other directions. For example, it says you have to have a higher minimum wage and you have to pay your people this way. And I mean, I think it's a little bit, it reaches out to other areas that make it hard to pass it. However, I think, look, without getting into it, you put a price on carbon, you have an infrastructure bill, that says we're going to put 1 million solar, Bernie and I had a bill to do this, 1 million solar panels on rooftops, you know, where appropriate. Some places of the country doesn't work, but in most of the places it does.
Sure.
We put solar on our house when we moved in. It's really kind of old fashioned now. It's 15 years ago, but it's phenomenal what it has done, how much it's saved for the environment and for us personally. So I think I can't comment on Joe's plan per se, but I could tell you this as a legislator. They're going to pass pieces of the Green New Deal. They'll pass pieces of Joe's deal, and they're going to go for the ones that are the most popular right away. So the ones that I talked about, putting the rooftops on, how about doing a huge move to insulate buildings, all the old buildings. I'm telling you, that is a win-win-win. You set up a revolving fund, businesses borrow at no interest, they double pane glass in a hot climate, you know, they make sure there's no leaking of air into their house in a cold climate. It all works. And put the rooftops on, clean it up, modernize the infrastructure, do it to the schools. And while you're at it, make sure that they have safe air conditioning systems in schools so that we don't risk our life going into a classroom or a restaurant. We have to do all of this. So I think it's a great question, because I look at the Green New Deal and I see jobs. I see jobs, jobs, jobs. I see great infrastructure projects. And I think Joe's going to do it, but I can't comment on every detail of both plans. I'm not an expert on that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So I guess now I want to talk a little bit more about just political polarization in your experience. So you've often spoke about how when you were in the Senate and the House, you would work with your Republican colleagues on a lot of legislation efforts. Sometimes actually, I think you mentioned over working with the Democrats, especially if it was something personal, right? And so would you mind telling the viewers a bit about what that was like and how it really differs from today's polarized climate where we see people going back and forth in a gridlock essentially in the government?
Yeah, it's a terrible situation today. And it used to be in the old days that I go back to, the 80s and the early 90s, that when you got in after election, you set aside all the acrimony and all the electioneering and all the politics. And it was a known fact you'd have 12 months until you geared up for the next election to work together. And so that first year, each party would roll out, you know, their priorities. What are your priorities? Nancy Pelosi did it. We'll take it now up to today. She did it, and they passed more than 300 bills. Do you know how many bills passed the Senate?
Very little.
Probably 2.
Jeez. Okay.
Because Mitch McConnell, he doesn't want to do anything. He didn't want to do anything the day after the election, nor did he. And he kept saying after Barack Obama won the first time, he said, I'm not helping Barack Obama win a second term. I want to make him a one-term president. He actually said that. So everything changed. Nothing gets done. And yes, in the old days, it was great. How did I do, for example, my after-school bill? I worked with a Nevada Republican senator named John Ensign. He had a very tough upbringing. He got in a lot of trouble after school. His mom was divorced. He really wound up in the juvenile justice system, John. And then his mom remarried, and he started to have a more stable life. And he recognized, and he was able to get some after-school care, the family, and he recognized how important it is. So look, a liberal me came together with a conservative him. We agreed with this issue. We set up a great program, it's still in effect, and we passed it. And it had huge bipartisan support. So this is the way it used to be. Every piece of legislation I ever wrote, the one I told you about to help the veterans, was with a very conservative Republican senator from Alaska, Ted Stevens. He and I didn't agree on anything, but we found that common ground. We found a sweet spot where we could work together. I could tell you story after story. We fixed there were laws in the military surrounding the way rape victims were treated, and it was horrible. They would ask them questions like, well, what were you wearing? And how many boyfriends have you had? There's nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And in a civil court, you can't ask those questions. But in a military court, until I did my legislation with John McCain, you know, they could. So you could find the sweet spots, you could do it. Now it's impossible. You see what's going on. And it's terrible. And I think it's very sad. In the Senate, we're going to have to do away with the filibuster, because otherwise we won't get anything done. And I never wanted to get rid of it because I liked the idea of getting consensus, but it's impossible now.
Yeah, definitely. I guess since we're talking about the Senate and all that, what do you think about the hearings, the Supreme Court hearings that are going on, and the vote for the confirmation? What do you think the response should be should Democrats take over the different branches of government?
Well, what we've seen is 100% disgrace.
Yeah.
I talked before about throwing a torch into the Senate. When you have a situation where Barack Obama had 9-10 months left on his term, and they wouldn't let him pick a Supreme Court justice after Scalia, that was just, I think it was Scalia, that was just horrific. And that was his, and they stole it. They stalled it. Then they swore on a stack of Bibles, the Republicans, that they would never, ever, ever confirm a justice in an election year. Along comes this situation, days from an election, and they're forcing a vote through. So this will have lasting effects. One thing I've learned in politics and in life, every action gets a reaction. Remember that. Every action gets a reaction. And the reaction to this, I think, is just going to be changing the way we do business in the United States Senate. Now, Joe has announced, and I think it was a great proposal, and I had actually suggested it to some of his people, that he create a commission of experts, legal scholars, constitutional scholars, to take a look at the reforms we need in the courts. And it could take the place of adding 2 seats, subtracting 2 seats. We could see other ideas such as term limits or age limits and such, some of which would take a constitutional amendment. But I think that was the right approach, because for him to have said, I definitely support this and this, he won't get it done unless the Democrats take over the Senate and do away with the filibuster. So it's very hypothetical until you actually see it. So last point, my friend Harry Reid, who I love, who I served with, was my leader in the Senate, said he felt, wait and see about the filibuster, see how the Republicans act if we take back the Senate. And if they cooperate and we can actually work with them, that's one thing. But if they can't, we ought to do away with the filibuster. That was Harry's idea.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely. I was watching the 60 Minutes interview last night with all the 4 candidates, and I recall Biden talking about that plan, and I noticed it was something new.
Yes.
That's super cool to hear about. So I guess now, I don't know, in terms of just very much your experience in the House versus the Senate, which one did you maybe like working in more? I know that last week we had Congresswoman Walters, and I was asking her about her experience in the California Assembly versus in the House. And so we'd love to hear your experience and just the differences and kind of what it meant to be a representative versus representing one of the biggest states in the country. So
yeah. Well, my answer is that I loved it all. And there is just no comparing it. And I'll tell you why. When you're in the House, you're one of 435 people. So, you know, when I got there, they said, don't talk for about a year. They would always say, be a fresh, now it doesn't work that way. People get right into the mix, but you kind of held back and learned your stuff before you started talking. But I love being part of a group. I'm that kind of person. You know, I love sports. I love cheering for the Dodgers or whoever I'm cheering for. This is the Dodgers, the Lakers. I love being part of a team. And, you know, when you're in politics, what I love to tell young people is you're part of a team, the more active you get. And the beauty of it is not everybody looks like you, not everybody worships like you. Not everybody thinks exactly like you, but you do have something in common, which is you choose to be a Republican or a Democrat. And there's certain values that go with those both choices. So it's kind of fascinating. So when you get into the House, I was a young person. There were very old people in the House. There were younger people in the House. You got to meet people. I never knew people from the Deep South. I still haven't ever been to Mississippi, nor do I frankly want to go. Excuse me if one of you is from there. But you have to get to know everybody and be part of a team. It's very hard at first because getting something through in the House is tough. So you learn how to work it. And that means getting coalitions and pushing and whipping the vote. So you have to whip everybody and you get to know them. If you have this idea, like when I got to the House, I saw that there was a room for me to do something about military procurement reform. There was the military announced that their B-1 bomber, and on the B-1 bomber, there was a coffee pot. And instead of being the cost of a coffee pot, it was like, $7,000 for a coffee pot. Yeah. And I said, what are you talking about? That's not right. So this group came to me and they said, well, let's change the whole system. And we did. And I did it with a lot of colleagues. So you have to, in the House, you have to be a team player. If you're someone that wants to take charge, don't go there, because you really have to sublimate your own ego to make something to get it done. So everybody takes credit for it. The Senate is a lot more power to the individual in the Senate. Yeah. Now in the House, if you're the Speaker, you can't have a more powerful position in the country except President. Seriously, Speaker is that powerful. But a regular member does not have that much power. But in the Senate, because of the rules, you can shut down the Senate if you want. You can force a vote if you want. You have the bully pulpit to talk hours on the floor, which you don't in the House. And I found it, very rewarding. I had to sit back and watch how it was done. I learned from the masters like Biden and Kennedy. Barbara Mikulski was a great mentor to me. And I learned how to do it. But it's I would say being in the Senate is akin in power to being the chairman of a committee in the House. Okay. And, people like Adam Schiff, how fabulous is he? He is, the chairman of the Intel Committee. But I could have as much power because I was one senator and I had just a lot of things I could do. Yeah. So I love them both. I think I could get more done in the Senate. That's a good answer. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned one word that that you mentioned that I think is super important is the word coalition. A lot of running for office is building that coalition, right? And so how did you build your coalition, whether it be when you ran locally and then for the Senate?
Well, it's organic. You have to get involved with an issue. Yeah. Or you have to work for someone who is running, and you build up people, a coterie of people who believe in you. Way I did it was there were a lot of, when I was a young mom, the Vietnam War was raging, and I took part in the Stop the War effort. We got something on the ballot. This was interesting. Just an advisory to the president. It had no meat to it, but it sent a message. We in our county want you to end the war in Vietnam. And we passed it. It was unexpected because it was a Republican county and Nixon was president. We actually got it passed. So people said, Barbara, that was a good thing you did. That was good. And then we had little things where we needed a stop sign. There were a lot of accidents and I took the lead in that. We wanted to have a park and I took the lead in that. And I wasn't thinking at all about running. As a matter of fact, people came to my house to ask my husband to run for local office. And he said, I can't do it. The job pays $11,000. What about Barbara? And I said, me? This is true. And I said, okay, I'll do it. So, it has to be organic. I really feel like that. And it will lead you somewhere. It may lead you to run. It may lead you to be working in the field. There's so many jobs and wonderful possibilities in the field. It may lead you to being a reporter, which I did actually for a while. Before I got elected to the House, I was a reporter. So just follow your passions, what you want to do. If there's an issue you've become aware of, dig into it. It may lead you to the Board of Education. That may be something you love, and then you run for Congress as a person with experience in education.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit to the Electoral College. Actually, I know we're talking about that in class this week, but I want to see what's your take on the Electoral College as a concept now? Do you think it needs to be modified or gotten rid of? I know some states assign electoral votes based on who wins the congressional district. I think Nebraska is one of them, right? And so some
two states.
Two states.
Maine.
Okay, yeah. So do you think that that's maybe a good intermediary for people who are hesitant?
No, we got to get rid of it.
Okay.
Let me be clear. It's a nightmare, and in the class you'll see. It was brought about. I mean, the founders didn't really know what to do. They were in a stew. They were very elitist, so they didn't want the popular vote. They thought, oh, give this vote to the people. They'll elect someone who's too much of a populist, and they were afraid of that, you know. So they came up with this crazy system, which we're going to go into in class. And we almost did away with it in the 60s. We came very close to it, but didn't happen. The House passed the constitutional amendment, the Senate, the Southerners filibustered. You know, it gives more power to a lot of Southern states. It takes away the power from the more urban states now. So I think it needs to be bye-bye. It needs to go away. I don't understand how you have a democracy where one person, one vote doesn't work. And we've had two examples in the last 20 years where the person who won the popular vote, Al Gore and Hillary Clinton, didn't wind up being president. So it's the only race in America where you can lose by winning. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, like, for certain areas too, depending on the amount of people in that area, like your vote could be proportionally worth less than another state, right? Based on it.
Oh yeah, I mean, any of us in California, well, we have a lot of other things to vote on, but the truth is, you know, as you can tell, Joe's gonna be fine, so he doesn't come here and we don't have to worry about it. But I know, for example, Harry has some relatives in Pennsylvania and they're at the edge of their seat. And they've had more visits from Biden and Trump.
And Obama.
And probably they've had visits from their children because of COVID.
Yeah, definitely. One of my friends lives in North Carolina and she's like, oh, like Trump's here, Biden's here. And I'm like, that sounds stressful, but it also sounds exciting. Cause I'm like, out here in California, like we know where our votes are going no matter what.
I know. It's pretty crazy. It's not one person, one vote. It's wrong. We have to fix it. What are the chances of fixing it? Not good.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're going to keep trying.
Definitely. So I guess that will lead me into my next point. Do you have any predictions for any small races or big races? I know the presidency is a big one, maybe for small Senate races for 2020. Maybe you see a couple seats flipping. I know some are very contentious and very close margins. And so what do you think about like Arizona or Georgia? Or we talked a lot about these different states.
Yeah, we did. Well, in our class, for those who were not in our class, we had an expert come who's a campaign consultant, one of the best in the country. And she had led me through 4 successful Senate races. And afterwards, we all took a guess as to what would be the net gain. We all agreed that, and I think every expert agrees, Democrats will gain something.
Yeah.
And the range will probably be between 3 and 7. And I think I came out with 5 or 6. Harry came out with a big number. What did you come out with, Harry? 7. And what did you come out with, Deven?
5. I was 5.
5, yeah. So, I mean, I'm happy to go through it, but I would just say the obvious. The ones we have the best chance of flipping are Arizona and Colorado. And after that would be Maine. Harry, you're good at this, and Deven, you're good at this. Maine would be next. I think we also could lose Alabama, which would be very bad.
That was my race.
So we have to make up for that. I think we look okay in Michigan. But Harry, what are the next ones? After Arizona, Colorado, Iowa.
And North Carolina.
North Carolina looks very good.
And then you get into wishful thinking with Georgia,
Alaska.
Alaska.
Texas, I don't think so. I don't. I hate to
South
say
Carolina is wishful, I mean, it would be
that.
great.
Yeah, that's wishful thinking, but it's possible.
Mhm.
Actually, a poll just showed Jamie up by 2.
Okay.
I forget, it was not his own poll, it was a different poll. So look, I would say, I think the minimum net pickup will be 3, which would bring it to a tie, I think. And then you'd have Kamala break the tie. But this is all a crapshoot in the sense that it depends on turnout.
Yeah.
Will people split their ticket? But look, I'm hoping for at least 4, and I predicted 5 or 6. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So I guess we are coming near the hour now. So I wanted to ask you, just in terms of students and kind of a lot of us have a big role in politics. So what do you think? A lot of us maybe, I've considered maybe I want to run for a local office later.
Yeah.
I was actually with my local city councilwoman and Melissa Fox. I don't know if you know them. She's running for state assembly, but I interned with her a couple years ago. And so I really liked it. I definitely want to run. But what's your advice for someone that wants to maybe run for office, and if not, just how to get involved in politics, maybe even during this last week, because so much on the line, right?
Well, this last week, we'll start from there, and then we'll go to your question about what my recommendations are. I think in this last week, if you can make calls from your cell phone into swing states, the DSCC, Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, has set up these phone banks so you could register. You could also be a poll worker, which would be really very intriguing and interesting, because the older people are not supposed to go out to the polls like that, but younger people can. So, but I think calling in to swing states, not to California. Now, having said that, there are 2 races here. One is TJ Cox's race here, and also Christy, help me with this, Harry.
Christy, I feel like I've heard of this.
What's her name? It's in your area, isn't it? Christy. Martinez, I think, beat her or something. Anyway, it's Katie Hill's seat.
Mike Garcia?
Mike Garcia took it, but it was a small turnout, so Christy could take it back. Christy Smith.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Those are, if you want to help, those would be the 2 races I would volunteer for, and they'll probably have you call in to the district.
Okay.
If you're more interested in the Biden race, you can also get up on their website. So you've got the DSCC, Joe Biden for president, and you have these 2 local races that you could choose to get into. San Diego has an interesting race as well. So that's that. In terms of your own future, I always think the best way to start, if an issue comes your way organically, you don't go out looking for it.
Yeah.
But let's just say, for example, you live in Orange County and there's a beautiful area that everybody wants a park, and some big developer comes in there and says, we're building 800 condos, and you want to help. You get involved with people, getting involved in an issue, or if there's a food shortage and there's a food bank and you want to help, and volunteering in that way. But eventually I recommend volunteering for a candidate who's running and getting to know that candidate. So for example, if you're interested in starting out, I was local board of supervisors. I challenged an incumbent, but let's say there's a seat opening, and there's really a good person running that you like at your young age, and you work hard with that person, you become invaluable to that person. That person knows you. They'll probably hire you if you want. And you just get to know how it works and the issues.
Yeah.
I like that a plan, because then you are experienced enough that you can actually run. The last point is, don't give up if you don't win the first time, because it's very hard to win the first time out. Sometimes you have to build up the credibility, and people, if you come out of a loss and you've gotten humility and you prove that you can, as Joe did, you can kick yourself, dust yourself off and stand up and start all over again. That's a really great quality in a pol. So those are my ideas. Look for the issue, look for the candidate, and go for it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I volunteered for a couple of years ago, and then again last year she's running for assembly. So I've had my experience, and I did.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
And she's going straight up.
Yeah. Cool. Definitely. I guess we have a little bit more time. So another question is, in terms of polarized politics, what do you think students can do to maybe help bridge that divide between us? Because I know sometimes it's gotten polarized with my friends. Actually, we go back and forth a lot, and we can't seem to agree on anything these days. And so, what is your approach to that and having a civil discourse, if you will? Yeah.
Well, there's a few rules I think are important. If you're going to have an unpleasant conversation, don't do it over dinner.
Yeah.
I mean it. Just talk, because it's a buddy, it's a friend, or someone in your fraternity or sorority or student. Just say, let's just enjoy each other's company, and then let's hash this out somewhere else. I don't like to mix it all up. And I think, the way before COVID, I was doing a lot of speeches to different universities, and one young man stood up from the back and he said, I can't talk to my grandfather. He's, he's for Trump, and he won't listen to me, and it's terrible. And I he's old and I don't want to lose him. I said, look, don't lose your grandfather.
Yeah.
You go up, first of all, you're not going to change him. He's 85 years old. It's like somebody trying to make me a Republican. I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I say, you go up to your grandpa, you put your arm on his shoulder, say, Grandpa, I love you. I'll always love you. Here's the deal. You're not going to change me. I'd rather we don't talk about this. Or, Grandpa, you want to set aside 5 minutes. You tell me your reasons, I'll tell you mine. But let's not try to convince each other, because we can't. So I think the point is, keep it civil. You're not going to change somebody by yelling at them or saying they're this or that. I think the best way is just keep it civil, keep it separated from the friendship. Eventually, you probably won't get close to that person, because I found, frankly, if you don't see the world the same way, it's just too difficult. But it doesn't have to be ugly, and it's up to us. We have to be, each of us, to just handle it in a way like I've been able to do in the Senate, which, I started out, I was intolerant of other people's views. You got to walk in their shoes. They see it differently.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Thank you so much. It's a great way to wrap this up. Positive note. So we thank you so much for being here. It was great talking to you. And thank you for everyone who attended this call as well. We will be posting this soon for people to watch.